Kill authorization 7 Ven sat in the Kelmpreth station, administrative queue, with 4 hours and 46 minutes left on its holding window. The document was complete, time-stamped, countersigned by 3 officers across 2 shifts. It had one field still blank, supervising officer signature execution confirmation. Warden Overseer Drevek Nall had not yet signed it. This was the only reason the creature in cell block Ven South was still alive. Das Havoc was at intake dock breath 3 when the transfer shuttle locked on. He was there because someone had to log the consultant's arrival, and he was the logistics officer on shift, and logging arrivals was what logistics officers did. He told himself this later. He told himself this several times. The consultant they had requested was a xenobiologist with a specialty classification in Category 9 and above fauna engagement. The consultant who stepped off the shuttle had a carry bag, a sealed data chip, and a thermos. No protective equipment, no support staff, no armor of any kind. Havoc's skin went a color he could not immediately name. No armor, no support staff, no explanation. She clipped the thermos to the outside of the carry bag, looked at the dock with the easy patience of someone who had been in worse docks, and waited for him to finish staring. Das Havoc, he said. Logistics, I'll walk you through security. Solon Prax, she said. Independent fauna consultant. She picked up the carry bag. What's the station's current internal temperature? He told her. 21 degrees, running slightly warm because one of the climate processors in the South Annex had been on manual override for 6 weeks. She nodded. Has the creature been showing a limb preference? He did not know. He said so. She nodded again as if this was useful information and followed him through checkpoint 1 without another word. That was the first thing Havoc logged about Solon Prax. She asked questions he did not understand and treated his answers like evidence. The part that still keeps me up at night. She already knew exactly what she was going to do when she walked off that shuttle. 96 hours before that, Kill Authorization 7 Ven had just been filed. Havoc had been at his station on Annex Observation Tier 7 when the notification came through. A juvenile Gravith, Origin World Venkarath, Category 11 Classification, Specimen Designation 7 Ven. The creature had been brought in through a deep-range transport that had found it injured in a wreck corridor 3 sectors out. Fractured forelimb. Alone. The transport crew had done what transport crews were not supposed to do, which was to take it aboard, and had then done what anyone rational would do, which was call for help the moment it woke up. The Kelmpreth containment team had received it in full exo armor, emitters at ready yield, which was procedure. The creature had destroyed 2 automated feed systems in the first 18 hours, fractured the containment wall in cell block Ven South once on day 2 and once on day 4, and put Senior Officer Marin in medical on day 5, with a pressure impact through the barrier that left her with 2 cracked ribs and a strong opinion about the entire situation. By day 6, the kill authorization had been filed. Havoc knew the broad facts. What he had not known, standing at his station on Tier 7 watching the lights run at 70% to manage power draw, was that down in cell block Ven South, the containment cage's magnetic stabilizers had been running at 38.7 Hz for 6 continuous days. He did not know this because it was not in any document he had been given. It was not in any document anyone had been given. It was, as it turned out, in a different document entirely. Annex Observation Tier 7 smelled of recycled air and old decisions. The lights were always dimmer than they should have been, not broken, just underpowered, the way the whole station was underpowered, built for a threat profile from a different era on a budget that had not kept pace. The Pelian Containment Authority had operated on Kelmpreth for 34 years without a single protocol revision. Warden Overseer Nall considered this a record of institutional stability. Havoc had always considered it a fact, the way gravity was a fact, the kind of thing you stopped noticing. He was beginning to notice it. In the back corner of Tier 7, against the wall nearest the observation window, a junior analyst named Yitha had spent the last 6 days sitting at a console with a data chip in both hands. She had submitted the chip to the Annex observation log 3 times. It had not been opened by any senior officer. She was holding it now. The casing had slight marks where her grip kept returning to the same spot. Havoc did not know Yitha well. She was quiet, kept to the back of rooms, and had been assigned to Kelmpreth for 7 months on a standard rotation from the outer sector analysis pool. What he knew about her was that she arrived early and left late, and that she had, 3 times in 6 days, pushed a data chip across the console toward officers who were already moving toward other things. He had logged her name and her chip and her 3 submissions in his record. He did not know yet why it mattered. He logged it because he logged everything, the way Talari logged everything, the way his mother had logged everything and her mother before her, because witnessing without record was not witnessing. It was just standing in a room. His skin was cycling between pale amber and gray-green in a pattern he was trying, with limited success, to suppress. Checkpoint 2 was in the B corridor between the outer dock ring and the station interior. Checkpoint 3 was at the base of the annex approach. Solon Prax moved through both of them the way experienced travelers moved through checkpoints everywhere. Without friction, without hurry, without suggesting she was in any particular rush to arrive. At checkpoint 3, she finished the last of the thermos and clipped it empty to the outside of the carry bag. She did this with the particular care of someone storing something they intended to use again. Havoc noted it. He did not know why it mattered. He noted it anyway. Warden Overseer Drevek Null was waiting at Annex Observation Tier 7. Havoc had worked alongside Null for 11 years. He knew the Pelians' tells the way you knew the tells of any person you had watched work in close quarters for a decade. The 6 dorsal pressure ridges that flattened under cognitive stress. The palm-flat stillness that looked like authority and was, if you knew what you were looking for, suppression. Null's eyes were fixed focus. The way all Pelian eyes were no pupil dilation, no capacity to show uncertainty through the face. He was tall, gray-green, precisely dressed, and had not in 31 years of service issued a directive he subsequently reversed. His dorsal ridges, when Prax walked in, were already flatter than Havoc had seen them in a while. Null delivered the threat assessment with the flat grammatical precision of a Pelian who was being generous with his time. The Gravith, juvenile, male, category 11 origin world, apex predator class. 34 years of Kelmpreth containment records showed a 0% survival rate for unprotected entry into active Gravith holding. The kill authorization had been filed 88 hours prior with the full concurrence of the station's containment board. Consultation had been requested as a procedural requirement. The authorization would proceed at 3:47 regardless of consultation, outcome unless new information, defined under Pelian Containment Regulations 7 Ven subsection 2 as verifiable biometric data indicating active misclassification, was submitted and reviewed within the holding window. He said all of this in a single unbroken paragraph. He had clearly said it many times, in many rooms, about many animals. Prax listened with her hands in her jacket pockets. "I'd like the creature's full biometric file," she said. Null gestured to the console. Yitha was already moving. She slid the chip across the console with both hands. Her grip left marks in the casing. Havoc was close enough to see her face when Prax took it. It was the face, Havoc thought, of someone who had been trying to hand something to a room for 6 days and had finally found a room that would take it. Prax clipped the chip to a reader without looking at it yet. She crossed to the observation window. Below, in cell block Ven South, the creature was visible. Havoc had seen the Gravith through the observation window before. He had done so from a professional distance, the way you looked at anything in a cell with a kill authorization on it, noting the threat indicators, logging the behavioral state, keeping the glass between himself and the classification. 6 limbs arranged in a weight-forward posture. Dorsal spines blazing white gold from the base of the neck to the tail, every spine fully extended, a display so consistent across 6 days that every report had used the same 2 words to describe it: active threat. The fractured forelimb pressed against the cold containment wall in a rhythmic, deliberate motion, over and over, too steady to be random. Every report had called this aggression. Prax looked at it for a long moment. "It's pressing its forelimb against the wall on a repetitive cycle," she said to the window to no one in particular. "That's not aggression." The room did not respond to this. Yitha's hand was very still on the console edge. Null said, "The behavioral classification is consistent with the active threat designation across 6 days of continuous observation by 3 separate." "I heard you," Prax said. She was already reading the biometric file. Havik wrote it down. That's not aggression. He did not know what category to file it under. He left the category blank and kept going. She spent 38 minutes at that window. The lights ran at 70%. The recycled air moved through the Tier 7 vents in the slow, slightly too dry cycle of a station conserving power. Noel stood with his palms flat on the nearest console's surface, the stillness that was his habit. Yitha did not move from her position at the back wall, near the data console, in the spot she had occupied for 6 days. Havik stayed near the door because staying near the door felt like the right distance from what was happening, though he could not have explained what he thought was happening. Prax read the biometric file and made no notes. She asked no more questions for 38 minutes. This was more unsettling than questions would have been. At minute 38, she looked up from the reader. What frequency do the magnetic stabilizers in cell block Ven South run at? Noel checked. He was the kind of person who always knew the answer, but this was the kind of question no one had asked him before. He pulled the maintenance log from the station system. He read the number. 38.7 Hz. Prax set the reader down on the console ledge next to the empty thermos. What frequency does a juvenile Gravath territorial challenge signal occupy in the Venkarath field record? A different quality of silence entered the room. Noel did not know. Havik did not know. 3 of the other officers in Tier 7 did not know. This was not a number that appeared in any Pelion Containment Authority document currently in circulation. It appeared in one document, which was 70 years old, which was archived in a public database under a classification system that predated the current station registry, and which had not been opened by anyone in this building. 38 to 39 Hz. It was Yitha from the back of the room. Her voice was barely above speaking level. She was not looking at the window. She was looking at the console in front of her. It's in Appendix D. Havik's skin went a flat, pale gray he had never seen it go. He would spend 2 days afterward trying to find that color in the Tulare Chromatic Reference Index. He would not find it. The cage has been running a territorial challenge signal at a juvenile apex predator, Prax said, every 6 seconds for 6 days. Nobody spoke, because nobody read Appendix D. Noel's dorsal ridges, already flat, pressed fractionally flatter against his spine. He was still standing with his palms on the console. His face showed nothing because his face could not show what he was processing. But his hands, both of them, not one, were now pressed palm down with a force Havik had not seen him use before. Havik wrote the frequency down. He wrote Appendix D. He wrote, the cage had been screaming at the animal in the only language it understood for 6 days, and no one had read past page 1. That was when the first loop closed, and 4 more opened at once. The D2 came 3 minutes later. Prax picked up the thermos from the console ledge, still warm, the canvas sleeve holding heat at approximately the temperature of a large resting animal, and held it in both hands the way she had been holding it since checkpoint 3. Then she told Noel that the white-gold dorsal display listed in every report filed over the last 6 days under the classification active combat posture was, in Appendix D of the pre-collapse Venkarath Field Surveys, Table 7, documented as juvenile high-distress signal. Not aggression. Panic. The surveys had been completed in 2211. They were archived in a public database. The classification system used at Kelmpreth Station had a field for threat level. It had a field for behavioral state. It did not have a field for panic. It never had. For 6 days, the system had been filling in threat level and leaving the other field blank, because the other field did not exist, because the protocol had been written before anyone had needed it. Noel said, the historical data originates from a collapsed biosphere under conditions that cannot be confirmed as applicable to a captive specimen under current containment parameters. He said it evenly. He said it the way he said everything, which was precisely and completely and without qualification. He was not wrong to say it. The archive was old. The world it described was gone. The gap between a free juvenile on Venkarath in 2211 and a captive juvenile in a station cell in the outer drift in the present day was real, and a competent officer was right to note it. He was not wrong. He was not right in the way that mattered. Prax looked at him for a moment. She did not argue with the assessment. She said, 34 years of containment records with a 0% unprotected survival rate, every Graveth that came through this station. Yes, and in 34 years, has any Graveth come through this station that wasn't immediately put into a cage running in the 38 to 39 HZ register? Noel's palms were very still on the console. The stabilizer frequency is a standard installation parameter, he said. Yes, Prax said, it is. Yitha was not looking at either of them. She was looking at her data pad, writing something, fast and small, filling lines in a way that suggested she had been waiting to write this down for 6 days and was making up for lost time. Havoc logged the exchange word for word. He did not editorialize. He did not have a word for what he was watching. The C3 mundane beat came about 90 seconds later. Prax set the thermos on the console ledge next to the reader. She set it down with the specific care of someone placing something they intended to pick up again, aligned with the edge, sleeve straight. Then she turned to face the cell access corridor. I'm going in, she said. The room made a sound, not a word. A specific quality of collective response that Havoc, in his record, described as the moment before something changes direction. The kind of sound rooms made when a sentence arrived that rearranged everything that came after it. Noel began citing Containment Regulation 7 Ven, subsection 4, paragraph 2. He cited it with full precision, clause by clause, the regulation that established the conditions under which unprotected entry into a Category 9 and above holding could be considered. The conditions being formal petition, biometric review, board concurrence, and a minimum 48-hour processing window. He was most of the way through it when he realized Prax had already turned toward the corridor. He finished the citation to her back. His dorsal ridges were flat, his palms were flat, his face showed nothing. She walked toward the corridor without looking back. Dr. Prax, he said. She paused. The regulation says you cannot be ordered into the cell, Noel said. It does not say anything about the corridor. A beat. I know, she said. I read it. She kept walking. Havoc stared at the corridor entrance. His skin was doing things he had no chart for. He counted the panel screws on the wall beside the door, a Tulare habit, something to do with the hands and eyes when the brain had run out of ways to process what it was watching. He got to 9 before he stopped himself. Yitha was no longer writing. She was watching the corridor entrance with both hands flat on the data pad, very still, the chip no longer in her grip. Noel stood at the console with his palms pressed flat and said nothing. The corridor was empty now. The sound of Prax's footsteps, unhurried, even the sound of someone who had already made a decision and was simply carrying it out, faded toward the cell access point. 4 hours and 11 minutes remaining on the kill authorization window. The Graveth, somewhere below and out of sight from this angle, had been awake for 144 hours. Havoc went back to the observation window. He picked up his record pad. He looked down through the reinforced glass at the creature in the cell, white gold spines, 6 limbs forward, fractured forelimb pressed rhythmically against the cold containment wall, and wrote down what he saw, because what else was a Tulare logistics officer supposed to do in a moment like this? He wrote, she is going in, no armor, no weapon. Only the thermos she carried from the shuttle. He did not write what he was thinking, which was that he had been keeping records for 14 years, and he had never once run out of categories before, and he was beginning to understand that tonight he was going to. 0959. Havoc watched her hang the station jacket on the corridor hook. She did it the same way she had clipped the thermos at checkpoint 3. No ceremony, no hesitation, the specific efficiency of someone who had done a version of this before in a different place with different walls. The carry bag stayed in the corridor. The data chip stayed with the bag. She took only the thermos, warm in its canvas sleeve, and walked the last 20 meters to the cell access point without looking back. He wrote it down. She took only the thing that was warm. He did not understand yet why that was the correct decision. He was starting to think he was going to. The cell door opened. On the monitor feed in Tier 7, the creature covered 8 meters in under a second. 6 limbs forward. Dorsal spines at full white gold, every spine extended to the tip, the blaze of it hitting the cell camera so hard the monitor adjusted its light filter automatically. The fractured forelimb was off the ground. 310 kilograms of juvenile graveth stopped 3 feet from Sol and Prax and held there, vibrating with a tension the air sensors were already flagging as pressure event imminent. Prax sat down, cross-legged on the cell floor like someone settling in for a long wait. She set the thermos in her lap, both hands around it. She looked past the creature, not at it, past it at the far wall at the corner where the wall met the floor. The specific angle of someone who has decided not to be the threat in the room and knows that where you aim your eyes is part of the decision. Yitha made a sound. It was very small. She had both hands on the edge of the console, and her color display had gone a pale, flat gold that Havoc had not seen on her before. On the monitor, the creature still vibrating, still 3 feet away. Prax on the floor, hands around the thermos, looking at the wall. Havoc counted panel screws. He got to 11 before he made himself stop. Null had not moved from the console. His palms were flat. His dorsal ridges were flat. He was watching the monitor feed with the fixed, non-dilating eyes of a Pelion who could not show what he was working through, and Havoc, who had known him for 11 years, and had learned to read the small things because the face gave nothing, watched those hands. Both of them pressed palm down with a force that was not calm, and read them as something close to held breath. Yitha began logging the dorsal display in real time. White gold, she wrote, full display, no change. Minute 2, white gold, no change. Minute 3, white gold, no change. Minute 4, Havoc was watching the monitor when it happened. The spines did not shift all at once. The ones closest to the creature's shoulders moved first, the faintest drop in intensity, a color that was still gold but less white in it, like something turning down from the inside. Yitha wrote amber partial, shoulder ridge only. Minute 7. The amber had moved down the spine array to the mid-back, and the white was gone from the front half, and the color the creature was now showing had no entry in the Pelion threat classification manual Havoc had been trained on. He knew this because he had pulled the manual up on his secondary console without really deciding to, and was scrolling through it with one hand while watching the monitor with both eyes. The manual had 17 entries. None of them were this. Yitha's hand was moving fast. She was cross-referencing something on her data pad, flipping between Prax's biometric file and a second document Havoc had not seen her open before. Her color display had shifted from flat gold to something brighter, less controlled. At minute 11, the creature lowered its head. It did not lower it fast. It did not lower it the way something surrenders. It lowered it slowly, the way something does when the weight of holding a posture for 6 days has finally been more than the reason for the posture, and it stepped forward 1 step, a single forelimb placed with enormous care on the cell floor, and pressed its muzzle against the warm canvas sleeve of the thermos. The room in Tier 7 went very quiet. Not the silence of people being still. The silence of people who have stopped breathing. The audio sensor in cell block Ven South logged the event at 22HZ and flagged it as anomalous and routed it to the general station alert system, which was the only thing the automated system knew how to do with a sound it had no category for. The alert appeared on the main panel. Null reached for the override. His hand, Havoc noted, was not entirely steady. He silenced it. He did not speak. He did not look at anyone in the room. He looked at the monitor. Prax had not moved. The creature's muzzle was still pressed against the thermos sleeve, and her hands were still around it, and she was still looking at the wall, at the corner, at the angle she had held without flinching for 11 minutes in a room where the instinct was to look at the thing that could end you, and the instinct was wrong. At minute 14, she placed one hand on the creature's fractured forelimb. It flinched hard. All 6 limbs shifted, and for 1 second the spines flashed back toward white, and Havoc's hand tightened around the record pad until the casing flexed. Prax held still. Her hand did not move. Her eyes did not move. She did not pull back. The creature did not pull away. The spines settled. Amber again, the white was gone. She began working, careful, slow, the same methodical quiet she had shown in every security checkpoint and every corridor since the moment she walked off the shuttle. Her fingers moved along the forelimb the way someone moves when they are reading heat and pressure and time since injury through touch, not looking at the limb, looking at the wall, because looking at the limb would require looking at the animal, and the animal was not ready for that yet. Yitha wrote deep amber, full display, shoulder to tail. Then she stopped writing and looked up at the monitor. The spines were settling again, past amber, into something between amber and blue that had no name in the manual, and then past that, and then deep, steady blue. Not threatening, not fading. Deep and steady and still, the full array from the base of the neck to the tail. The color of something that has decided, after a very long time of deciding, that the room it is in is not trying to kill it. That color, Yitha said. Nobody asked her what she meant. They were all looking at the monitor. It's an Appendix D. A biologist on Venkarath documented it once, 80 years before the collapse. She was reading from the pad now fast, the words coming out in the flat tone of someone delivering information they have been trying to deliver for 6 days. Juvenile resting safe display, deep blue, full dorsal array, observed only when animal confirms no active threat in immediate environment. She stopped. She called it the resting safe blue. She said she only ever saw it 3 times. She included it in the appendix because she thought someone might need it later. The room absorbed this. Noel's hands were still flat on the console. Nobody reached Appendix D, Havoc said. Not an accusation, just the sentence that was true. No, Yitha said, nobody reached Appendix D. The containment unit came at minute 38. Station protocol. Unprotected physical contact with a Category 9 and above specimen sustained beyond 30 minutes triggered mandatory extraction. Automatic. Not a judgment call, not a decision any individual officer made, a threshold that existed in the protocol because the protocol had been written for the worst version of this situation, and the protocol did not know this was not the worst version. 6 officers. Full exo armor, white and gray, the bulk of the impact plates on every joint. 2 emitters at lethal calibration, the kind that left the yield setting unrecommended for use in enclosed spaces unless the alternative was worse. The cell door opened. The spines went white gold in under a second. Not amber, not blue. White gold, full display, the blaze of it flooding the cell camera again, all 6 limbs shifting forward, weight transferred to the uninjured forelimbs, the fractured one lifting off the floor. The lead officer raised the emitter. Prax stood up. She stood in one smooth movement, unhurried, no sudden rise, the same pace she did everything, and placed herself between the emitter and the creature. The creature, as she rose, pressed its injured flank against her back. Hard. The weight of it staggered her 1 step forward, but she did not fall, and she did not reach back, and she did not look at the emitter. She stood in her shirt sleeves, in the middle of a cell that had a 0% unprotected survival rate across 34 years of Kelmpreth operations, and she waited. The lead officer took 1 step forward. The creature shifted its weight. The officer stopped. Nobody fired. Nobody moved. The monitoring feed was live. Havoc could see it on the secondary panel, the station-wide broadcast that had gone active when the containment unit entered, the feed that was now showing this moment to 43 crew members across 8 station sections. Havoc counted door screws. He got to 47 before he stopped. He stopped because he realized he could not remember the last 12 and had been counting without seeing. 3 of the 6 containment officers had lowered their emitters, not on an order, not on a signal. Noel had not told them to raise them again. The cell comm activated. Noel's voice came through it, and Havoc, standing at the Tier 7 observation window with his record pad and his 47 screws, heard something in that voice he had not heard in 11 years of knowing the man. The procedural cadence was gone. "Dr. Prax," Noel said, "what are you doing?" Not a challenge, a question, a real one. Prax did not turn around. She was still looking at the wall. "Humanity was never the apex predator," she said. "On our home world, we were mid-tier, slow, fragile, no armor. No natural weapons above a certain threshold. There were animals on Earth that could remove a limb in a single motion, and we lived alongside them for 40,000 years." A pause, the creature behind her had not moved. "We didn't dominate them. We couldn't. So we learned to read them instead. We learned to read the things that were faster and stronger and built for things we weren't built for, and we learned to stand next to them without triggering the reflex that said we were the threat. We put our hands inside those animals' mouths because it was the only way to show the mouth that the hand was not the enemy. No armor, no weapons, no distance. Earth didn't produce the strongest species in the galaxy. It produced the only species that chose, on purpose, repeatedly, to be the smaller thing in the room, because that was the only tool that worked. The lead officer with the emitter was very still. The creature's spines behind Prax's back were moving. Havoc watched on the monitor. White gold bleeding back through amber, amber deepening, the blue returning from the shoulders first, moving back down the array. 40,000 years of practice, Prax said. That's what I brought, that's all I brought. Noel did not answer. His hands were still flat on the console. His dorsal ridges had not moved in a long time. Havoc stopped trying to write anything down. He was just watching. The mid-collapse hit him then, not in the story, but in himself. He realized later that he had been the station's nervous system the whole time, logging and categorizing and filing, and that somewhere in the last 47 screws he had run out of categories, and the blank field he kept leaving in his record was not a failure of documentation. It was the only honest response available. The station had no word for what was happening. He had no word for what was happening. The blank field was the most accurate thing on the form. He picked up the record pad. He started writing again. He did not know what he was writing. He wrote it anyway. 3 of the containment officers had lowered their emitters. Null had not told them to raise them. 43 people were watching the feed, and none of them had moved. Something was changing, and the record was going to need to exist, and he was the one holding it. The override came at 3:47. Not an announcement, not a speech. Null's hand moved to the authorization panel and made 2 entries. The first rescinded the kill order, the second formally suspended the extraction protocol pending welfare review. And then the hand came off the panel and rested flat on the console ledge, palm down in the habit that was his, the stillness that read as authority and had always been suppression. In the cell, nothing moved. The Gravith was still pressed against Prax's back. Its spines were deep, steady blue, full array, no white, the resting safe display from Appendix D, the color that had been documented once, by a biologist on a world that no longer existed who had thought someone might need it later. Prax had not moved. She was standing with her hands at her sides, in her shirt sleeves, looking at the wall, and she looked. Havoc wrote this in his record, and then read it 3 times before he decided it was accurate, like someone waiting for a kettle. The lead containment officer looked at the back of her head, then at the creature's spines, then at the door. He did not move. The execution confirmation field sat in the administrative queue with 2 new entries time-stamped 3:47. The field itself, the signature field, the one that had been waiting since the document was filed, was still blank. In 34 years of Kelnpreth operations, no field in that document had ever been left blank. Havoc looked through the observation glass at Noel's face, the fixed eyes, no dilation, the face that could not show uncertainty, and found something in it he had no name for and wrote down only. He has seen it now. Then he stopped counting. He started writing. The monitoring feed was still running. 43 people were watching. He did not know in that moment how that footage was going to travel, only that it was, because things like this moved, and he was going to be very curious later about exactly how. The containment unit filed out. The cell door closed. The creature stayed in the resting safe blue for 11 minutes after they left. Havoc logged it. He stared at the number for a while before he filed it. Within the hour, Null had the magnetic stabilizer frequency in cell block Ven South shifted from 38.7 Hz to 14.2 Hz. He did this without discussion, without filing a change request, without explaining his reasoning to anyone on shift. He simply issued the maintenance order and went back to his console and began drafting the formal incident review before the shift ended. The creature ate for the first time in 6 days. Prax placed a protein block at the cell threshold, stepped back, sat against the wall. The Gravith took 40 minutes to cross the cell. Havoc, watching from Tier 7, logged the time and then sat looking at it 40 minutes before he saved the file. Yither arrived the next morning at the start of shift with 2 coffees. She gave one to Prax without saying anything. The second morning, she did the same. By the 4th morning, it was simply what happened. The same way Havoc logging everything was simply what happened. The way Talari kept records of what they witnessed because it was the right thing to do, and because some things needed to exist somewhere outside the people who saw them. She had started cross-referencing the Venkarath field surveys, all of them, including the appendices, with the Gravith's full biometric log. She was on page 14 of a fresh data pad. She had not yet reached the end of what she did not know. The cell audio sensors were still running on the old calibration. This was the thing Havoc noticed in the days that followed. The subsonic events started coming in with more regularity, 22 Hz, then 18 Hz, then a long 14-second event at 16 Hz that the automated system routed to general alert, and Null silenced each one faster than the last, with less pause each time, not looking up from whatever he was writing. Havoc had stopped adding them to the anomaly log. He had started a different log. He had not decided what to call it yet, but the working title in his head was Things the System Doesn't Have a Word For. Null's formal incident review reached the Pelion Containment Authority within 12 days. Havoc did not see it before it was filed, but he heard about it from an officer who had, and he wrote down what he was told with the understanding that he was going to want this record later. It was the first document from Kelmpreth in 34 years to carry the phrase current protocol is insufficient. It recommended 3 things: reclassification of Gravith juvenile distress signals across all outer drift containment registers, a mandatory welfare assessment window before any kill authorization above threat tier 5 was countersigned, and the appointment of Solon Prax as permanent fauna liaison for the outer drift sector at a rank equivalent to Null's own. He filed it under his full title and seal. He did not discuss it with anyone before sending it. Havoc asked him about it once, obliquely, and Null said only that the record had been incomplete and that incomplete records produced incorrect outcomes, and then he went back to what he was writing. The Pelion Containment Authority took 11 weeks to respond. By then, Null had already implemented all 3 recommendations internally. The response, when it came, did not reverse any of them. The monitoring footage reached the Galactic Conservation Exchange 9 days after the incident through channels Havoc spent 2 weeks trying to trace. He never fully traced them. Yitha's expression, when he asked her directly, was not a denial. It was the expression of someone who had been pushing a data chip across consoles for 6 days and had simply found a larger console. Within 9 days of receiving the footage, the exchange designated a protected transit corridor for Venkarath fauna, the first Category 11 origin world to receive that status. In the internal registry, it was listed as the Prax Passage. Nobody told Solon Prax for 4 months. When she found out, she asked one question. She asked whether the sensor coverage accounted for injured animals traveling at reduced speed, or only healthy specimens at standard transit velocity. The exchange had not considered this. They considered it after she asked. On the day of transfer, Prax stood at the hold ramp with the thermos in both hands. Officer Marin, back from medical, 2 ribs healed, her opinion of the situation now substantially revised, stood to the left of the ramp with her arms folded. Yitha stood to the right with her data pad, and a coffee she had stopped pretending was for anyone but herself. Havoc stood behind them both with his record pad because he was the logistics officer, and this was a transfer event and transfer events got logged, and also because he could not have made himself not be there. Null was at the top of the observation tier. He did not come down, but he was there, standing with his palms flat on the railing, watching. The ramp was down. The hold was open. The lights inside were warm. Havoc had checked the temperature setting that morning and found it already adjusted to match what the Venkarath field surveys recommended for juvenile Gravith in transit. He did not know who had changed it. He had a strong suspicion. The creature came down the cell corridor slowly, not cautiously. Slowly, the way something moves when it has decided where it is going and is not in a hurry about it. Its spines were a deep, steady blue. The fractured forelimb was healing, not healed, but healing, carrying partial weight now, the gait slightly uneven but no longer guarded. It approached the ramp. It stopped at Prax. It pressed its muzzle against the warm canvas sleeve of the thermos. One long press, the full weight of the head resting there for a moment, and then it walked up the ramp without looking back. The hold door closed, the ramp sealed. The cell audio sensors in the empty block Ven South, still running on the old calibration, logged one final subsonic event. Duration, 4 seconds. Frequency, 14 Hz, lower than any previous event, lower than the challenge register by a margin Havoc checked twice. The pre-collapse field surveys had documented a signal at this frequency exactly once. In a footnote in Appendix D, in the handwriting of a biologist who had been trying to be useful to someone she would never meet. Juvenile departure safe signal. Animal has confirmed environment as non-threatening. Animal is leaving because it chooses to, not because it was driven. The automated system classified it as anomalous. Havoc cleared the anomalous flag. He left the classification field blank. He had been doing this for 3 weeks. He had started to think the blank field was the most accurate thing on the form. Prax clipped the thermos to the carry bag. She picked up the field kit from the dock bench. She had 4 consultations left in the quarter, 3 sectors, 4 species, 4 briefing files with survival rating headers that would make most licensed consultants ask for a break before opening them. She opened the first one on the transit shuttle, somewhere between Kelm Preth and whatever came next. Same expression she had for all of them. Unhurried, unimpressed by the danger listed in the header. The look of someone for whom something is wrong, something can probably be fixed, and the fix is going to require sitting still in a room where most people would be running. She had done it before, she would do it again. On the dock, the cell audio log sat open on Havoc's secondary console. The last entry, frequency 14HZ, duration 4 seconds, classification field blank. He had not closed the log. He kept meaning to. He kept not doing it. Yitha was already back at her console, cross-referencing something, the data pad open to a new page. She was already reading.